everybody see the presentation now? Gavin, maybe you can give me a heads up.
Yeah, see that fine, yeah. Good.
Okay, great. So good to see you all, and thanks for the great turnout. I've been looking very much forward to giving this presentation. It's also my, how do you say it? My first online presentation of such. I've done a few on-site presentations so far, and it's kind of new to this this whole online thing. I think especially the lack of sound and feedback from you guys will be probably the most biggest change, but I hope we can get through that together. I have a diverse background. I was trained as sergeant in the Royal Danish Air Force, then went on to become a product development and innovation master, or what you call it. Thought that I was going to make all these new awesome physical products that we sell to customers all around the world, and started working as a project manager within that field. And then suddenly an IT project came along, kind of from the side, and I was like, sure, okay, I'll add that to the pile of all the other products I was handling. But suddenly something happened, and before I could look back, I only had IT projects and loved it. So I went on to become chief digital officer of a smaller shop or a smaller product-based company in Denmark. And after some time, I just felt this big draw of wanting to work entirely with business intelligence. I mean, I had seen the impact it had had on that organization, and I just wanted to learn more. So I decided to go all in on business intelligence. Started as an in-house consultant and as Universal Robots. Worked there for some time, and recently switched to become external consultant, working with a bunch of different clients, and I love that. I added the data list to the data analyst to the top of it, not because I think it's the most important thing in the world, but I actually just got it recently, which was kind of nerve-wracking because I should have gotten that 1 year ago, but finally the time was there. Yeah. So actually my whole career in data started way before any of these, and if you had sitting here live before me, I would have asked you if any of you could guess. So I mean, feel free to guess in the chat if you want. I don't think I can actually see the chat while speaking here, but I'll give you the answer in a few seconds. So yeah, my career started already when I was 10, I think, when I learned this tool. I think it was the same for a lot of us probably. And over time, I'm not sure we all love it as much as we used to do. I don't. I mean, it's a very powerful tool, but it just causes some headaches from time to time. Anyway, a little quick tip here. If you do not like your users exporting this data, there is actually a setting for disabling this in your admin center. This is not the topic for today, but yeah, you can know that it's there. So back to the topic. That was a little bit about me. I would like to talk about complex access control design with row-level security. It's quite a mouthful. I used to say, basically, we're going to talk about who gets access to what data and how we can do this in bigger organizations. So I'm going to go through the case. Personally, I was working for a client that was needing these capabilities. It was a big multinational client, but I'll talk more about that in the bullet. Then we will go through what I think are the 5 most important building blocks to secure that you have proper enterprise row-level security. Those are workspace roles, decoupled datasets, sometimes also called golden datasets, row-level security in itself, Active Directory security groups, and finally, security tables. When we've gone through that, I hope to have some time in the meantime to make some demos also. So sorry if I'm rushing through the content a bit, because I would really like to get time to do these demos. But after that, I want to propose what I think is a great methodology for validating these security setup, validating your RLS scripts, because sometimes it can be a very, very big pain if you develop something and then maybe a month after you recognize that there's a problem with what you made. So it's very, very important to be able to validate it. Quick roundup and question and answers. Right. So Gavin, since it's the first time I'm doing this, I assume we just take questions by the end of it. Just correct me if I'm wrong on that part.
Yeah, that's right. I'll monitor the chat if there's any questions, then we're going to have a round at the end.
That sounds good. That sounds good. All right, let's get started. So I've invented a company here. Let's call it AdventureWorks. Very, very, very unique name. Making bikes and bike helmets. I think it's a great company to talk about, because a lot of you have experience with this company and this company's data, so it makes it easier to understand. But imagine that you're working with AdventureWorks, and they have different departments in different countries. Maybe they even have sub companies in some of the regions, and you're just sitting there as a BI manager, and you're like, why do we have to make a data set for each of these areas? Why do we have to make a data set for each of the companies? Why can't we just make one data set and then chop it up using some access control, so we can make reports and data set that works across the entire company or even across multiple companies, but that whenever a user opens it, it looks unique to the data that they actually have access to. So this was my exact challenge, and this is where RLS becomes very, very handy. So we're imagining this scenario. It's a customer that has sales in England, or Great Britain, Germany, France, USA, Canada, and Australia. And you can imagine, like, it could be a setup where there's a different cooperation in the States and in Canada, covering the whole of Americas. Maybe some manager needs access to both of these, the whole region. Maybe some other manager needs access to the whole of US. Maybe a third manager just needs access to one of the states in the US. There can be all these kinds of granularities in security. And in some way, we as BI designers need to approach and find the best solution that fits the requirements of our clients or our companies if we work in-house. All right, so the 5 building blocks. As I mentioned before, I believe that these 5 building blocks are paramount to making great security setups. Some of them are the building blocks of actually doing it. Other are areas of great risk if you don't consider what you do with them. We'll get onto that. Originally, I planned to go through them in this order because I think this is the order that you should go through them when you start thinking about security architecture in an organization. But actually, I think I'm going to take a step back and start the way I started, because when I was faced with this task, I just, like any of us probably would have done, I just jumped immediately into making some solution. So I started with row-level security myself. And for those of you who are new to row-level security, I'm just going to go very briefly over the basics. So row-level security is all about controlling access to data across the rows. So if you on a field in the row have the value for a country, could be England, France, Germany, USA, Canada, Australia, then you can chop up your model and pick a slice and offer that to your users. So you could say we make a role in row-level security that only shows Australia data. Well, we'll just implement that in the code and offer a role for Australian data. That's a very simple approach, probably not always the best, but that's how it can be done. And the new addition, object level security. I'm not going to go through it in great depths. It's new, it's kind of interesting. I'm doing a different speak on that later on in November. But just know it exists. So you also have some possibilities there for handling data access on column level and on table level. Yeah. One principle I think is very important to consider when working with row-level security is that row-level security roles are handled by a union permission principle. Meaning that if I give you access to one thing and another thing, you will have access to both. So if I give you access to all sales in Mexico, but I also want to limit you to only the sales where you are the key account owner, that doesn't work. You get access to all the sales, you're a key account owner, but you also get access to all the sales in Mexico, also the ones where you're not a key account owner. So the filters, they don't cross-filter each other, if you could put it like that. Good. I'm just going to go through a basic demo here, a basic example of row-level security on the most basic level. So hold on here. So you have a report here. Is everybody seeing the report from Power BI? Gavin?
Yep.
Great. So this is like a very simple standard sales report with way too many filters and way too many things put in there, but it gives a good understanding of the case here. So let's say we go and we want to implement some very, very basic row-level security. We go to manage roles. We add, just ignore the top one for now. We add a very simple role called Germany. Then we can go to our dimensional table. It could also be a fact table. Pick the one we want to filter and just make a very simple filter. Country equals Germany. We'll now filter data to be only Germany. And we'll also go through your model. So if you have German sales territory here, it will filter your sales. And in turn, if you have multiple levels, it will also filter your subsequent tables. But I think most of you understand this principle already, so we're going to go back to this demo, hopefully, but that was it for now. And if we go back to my experience with working with this, because I set up some row-level security, I actually made some complex access using, and we'll get to those principles, using a dynamic RLS, using some security tables, using all these features. And I just implemented and thought everything was fine. It went to some workspaces and people started inviting new users to this workspace. And suddenly I got the worst kind of feedback you can get when you work with security. And that was people have access to more data than they should have access to. So imagine my frustration. I thought I had built a perfectly fine row-level security setup, that the script was like error-free. It was flawless. There was like no bugs in it. I just couldn't fathom why did people get more access than they should, until I started actually reading up on the documentation for how workspace roles really work. And this is not a talk about workspace roles. So I just do want to tell you that, I mean, we can control access to data sets and report through the roles in the workspace, or through giving direct access, build access, read access, or share access. This is definitely something you can Google if you want to learn more about. It can be quite powerful, especially powered with the decoupled dataset or golden datasets. You definitely want to utilize the giving build access to those datasets. But the big one here, the big problem with workspace roles that you should be aware of when considering row-level security setups, that is all of these roles ignores RLS completely. So if you have your data set in a workspace with admins, with members, even with just contributors, they will see all the data. No matter what role you put them in, no matter what you have scripted in RLS, everything will be ignored. They have data access. It's basically just a view of roles that is adequate for using row-level security. And I don't know about you, but for me, that was a big problem and it became a governance headache, because how are we going to monitor and govern and make sure that never anyone will be upgraded to even contributor of a workspace? And our solution is the next building blocks, actually. It's something that is already best practice for a lot of different reasons, but that's decoupled datasets. If you move your datasets away from the workspaces that your users are actually working in day to day, you can suddenly move it to a workspace that's completely managed by IT or by your BI department, or even by an external consultant if you're a very small shop and you want to outsource this governance. So I think that's a really good idea. And I mean, we could talk a lot of time about all these different stages of decoupling, but I'm just going to jump through them and say that you should, if you haven't worked with decoupling datasets before, you should definitely Google golden datasets or decoupled datasets or anything of the like, because there are ways to move to decouple your dataset from your report, enable your datasets to create reports in other workspaces. There's an admin setting for this. You can also see it in the presentation now. So just know that to enable this functionality, you need to go to the admin center and just enable the use datasets across workspaces. Once that is done, you can practically remove all the reports from the workspace that you have your dataset in, and suddenly you have a dataset repository. You can start adding more datasets. You can have reports across different workspaces using these centralized golden datasets. And why is that important when we talk about RLS? It is because suddenly I have control over who I build access to the dataset. No one is ever going to be invited to this central dataset repository as a member or as a contributor or as an admin even. This is controlled by us. This is controlled by BI or IT or central governance. And we can add on processes of how we grant access. And at one of my clients, we even went that far and automated this process. So users could go to Power Apps. They could pick the list of dataset areas. Maybe they wanted sales data in Mexico even. Applied for it, went through an approval workflow, and that approval workflow gave them build access to the adequate dataset by the end of it. If we had these datasets in like a user-owned workspace, it would just be too easy for the users to circumvent all the rules we've made, because they could just add another member. And if we tried to keep them all as viewers, they couldn't add anyone. So we would suddenly have to manage all workspaces in the entire organization. It's definitely something worth looking up the whole golden dataset mentality. Okay, now we've been through that. So imagine you have a dataset. It's lying there in your golden dataset central dataset repository. You've made some access setup where people can apply and you then grant them access to the dataset. But you suddenly start to feel this kind of nagging feeling of this is becoming a governance mess. We have datasets with 200 different unique named users that have access to this dataset. And every day users need to be removed, they need to be added. on and on and on. And IT is complaining that the process of adding these people to all these data sets, it takes a long time. They need to log into the Power BI portal. They need to click. They need to add people. They need to make sure that the list is already up to date. Lucky for us, Microsoft already invented functionality to handle this. It's called Azure Directory Security Groups. So Active Directory Security Groups, for those of you who haven't worked with this before, just work like buckets. And you can put things in these buckets. You can put people, humans. You can put machines. So basically software, robots, service accounts, stuff like that. And you can put devices. So in respect to Power BI and RLS, I have no idea what to use the devices thing for, but I mean, good to know that that is possible. A funny thing about Active Directory Security Group, if you want to build like really complex security setups, is that you can inherit access through multiple security groups, meaning one security group can be a member of another security group. So as you see here, bucket below can actually be a member of the bucket above, meaning that if we give access to the top bucket to sales data in Canada, then the members of the bucket below, they will also get access to sales data in Canada. But if you have sales data in France in the below bucket, will not get access to that to the top bucket. So you can make very complicated, also overcomplicated setups using Active Directory security groups. And there's a funny thing about these security groups as well. And I have no idea how to utilize it or what to do with it. But you can actually have circular dependencies, so they give all access to each other. Don't know exactly how they managed to implement that, but I just noticed that you can, and read that people say that that's completely fine. It has use cases. I don't think so much for row-level security, but anyway, that was some background stuff. We've been through the basics of row-level security already, and we've been through some of the pitfalls that you can fall in developing very, very good row-level security setups, but forgetting to consider workspace roles, or just drowning in governance by trying to control access to data sets on each and every user in a very big corporation. For that, you definitely need to look into security groups or something similar. But yeah, we're back to row-level security groups. We can finally start implementing them, trusting that what we make is actually what is going to the user. So that's a very good place to be. Yeah, we already talked about this. The row-level security kind of traversed through your data model and filters it the same way that you would see it filtering normally. The only difference is that you can be aware of is that if you have bidirectional filters, you do need to manually enable your row-level security to also traverse through that relation. But I think that's about it for how it's behaving differently than normal cross-filtering. So row-level security, if we go back to actually scripting out row-level security, it can seem daunting. It can seem quite hard to overcome for some. But by the end of it, I think you should all know that it's all just DAX. I mean, hopefully you're already aware of DAX and quite competent in working with DAX, but RLS is all just DAX. At least that's what I wrote the first time I gave this presentation, but all right, it's almost all just DAX, because I think we all know DAX is never just DAX. And also almost because there are a few additions in RLS that you don't work normally with in DAX, and that would be the functionalities that allows for dynamic row-level security, so user principal name and username. Yeah, and row-level security can be divided by static and dynamic row-level security. I'm going to go through dynamic row-level security a bit more when we start talking about security tables. I just would like to know, can someone say in the chat if they have no idea what the difference between static and dynamic row-level security is, because then I gladly just show a quick demo example. Gavin, I don't know if you can tell me if anyone is writing.
It looks like there's no questions yet.
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay, so a few people don't have any, they don't know the difference between static and dynamic. So
Good.
unless you wanted to give a quick demo,
I would gladly do that. So basically, the difference between static and dynamic row-level security can most easily be explained with an example. So as I showed you before, here we have an example of a setup where we went to our sales territory table. We made a very static filter saying country should be Germany. We can use this role. We can add all the people from the Germany region into this role, make sure that they only see German sales. It's a very static way. It's a way where we are forced to control the access within the roles and within adding people to the roles. It also means that we have to create a role for each different country we want to do this with. And imagine you're the sales manager of Americas, the whole part with Canada and America and USA and all the regions, and you need to be added to get access to all these countries. If you have a setup like this, you may have to be added to all of them. So you need to be added to USA, to Canada, or maybe even added to the individual states. You could also create a duplicate role and call it all, and then say country is, I don't know, not blank or something like that. Or you could say in and then list up a few company names. Sorry if this is not correct, Dax. I don't really have something akin to this. That's also a way to handle these static row-level security. So we can call this one multiple. But it's still static. No matter who is assigned to this role, they will see the exact same data as everyone else within this role. Great. And then we have dynamic row-level security, which is a really cool feature. And I'm just going to add this quickly for those that don't know about it yet, because there is a field in DAX called user principal name. That will tell you what user is logged on when you open the report. And you see here, that's actually my email. So I'm currently logged in and as this user, and our DAX code can understand this. It knows who I am because it knows I'm logged into Power BI in some way or another, or through Windows on my computer. So it knows who I am. So we can start making dynamic setups. We can start to say, oh, it's this guy, but this guy has access to this and this and this and that. And that is dynamic row-level security. So here is an example. It's also an example, it's an example of our sales data. So let's just take a quick look at our sales data. Our customer dimension data. So in this data, we have a lot of customers. They have some geographical info and everything, but we also have a key account, ignore that, and a key account manager. So let's say, for example, Xavier Alexander here, he has a key account called CAS, and he has a key account manager, MHP. So we have these emails, these identities within our data in some way or another. And we can start mixing the user principal name function with our actual data. And let me just show you how. So if we make a new role and we call it customer key account role or something like that, we can go to our customer table and we can say, skip this for now. Key account must be equal to user principal name. We save. And you will not see much of a change now, but when I then go and view this role, you will see, oh, I didn't have, it was this one. And you will suddenly see all the data is updating. It knows that now, because I'm validating this role of security setup, it knows that I'm now logged in with this UPN mhpav.com. And I only see the sales data where I am the key account. You can also see the key account dimension here. I can only see myself. I don't have access to filtering on all the others. So I have dynamically created a filter that looks at who I am as a person and then looks at what is my role in my actual data and gives me the proper access. That's dynamic. You can add on to that. And I mean, imagination is your limitation here, or DAX is your limitation here. You can add on to that. You can say key account should be equal to user principal name, or sign key account manager should be equal to user principal name. We are adding on a bit of complexity. It's still a very, very simple example. And you'll see now different logic. Because MHP here is the manager of these three other employees, suddenly I'm not just seeing the data where I have been making sales, I also see my employees' data, the ones that I'm the manager for, and gives me the opportunity to filter through them. This doesn't mean that I got access to all the data, because if we stop viewing this as an RLS and just viewed all data, you will see there's plenty of other employees in this organization. Okay, I think that was as quick as we could go through that one. Let's jump back. Wait. So just know that when you start working on dynamic RLS territory, user principal name is 9 out of 10, or maybe even more, the one you need to care about. That's the one where you can identify who is actually looking at your data. All right, let's try to take it a step further. Gavin, can you give me a timestamp? When are we supposed to go to Q&A?
Yeah, we can. I mean, normally we finish around 7, but sorry, 8 CET, but around 20 minutes left. But we can go longer if needed.
I think that's fine. We'll just we'll just go to the next step then. Good. So now that we've went through the basics of static and dynamic RLS, we can start talking about security tables, because security tables and dynamic RLS goes hand in hand. So what are security tables? Security tables is tables in your data model that defines which individual users can see what data. So if we think back to the data model I showed you before, we had sales data, and within that sales data, we had key account manager and we had key account owner. Yeah, we had key account and we had the key account manager. In the way I view it, that is a replacement for a security table. We don't exactly need a security table in that setup, because we already have data in our source that give away the security setup. So I think that's also an important differentiation here. When you start wanting to look into dynamic role-level security, you need to think about, do I use security logic, governance logic, access logic that is already living inside a source system, or are we forced to create a new one? And I think a common question here would be, well, what should we use, the one or the other? Personally, I would always prefer to use the source system logic if it's there and if it makes sense. So imagine that you have some data on timesheets for production workers. They put in the timesheet, they register who puts in the timesheet, and you have another table where you have who is manager to who. Very similar to the sales key account setup I showed you before. That's a very clear case of who should have access to what. Obviously, the production workers should have access to the data that he has his own name stamp on in our database. And arguably, the managers should also have access to the data of his employees if he needs to see who had put in what hours and for salaries and everything. So that's a very clear case, and we get it served to us directly from our source data. Very easy, very good to go. We don't need to include a lot of stakeholders. We don't need to include upper management because we just take the security from the source system. If you went to the source system, you would probably see the same kind of behavior. People can see their own timesheet entries, but they cannot see each other's. The managers can maybe see their employees' setups. And if that source system has that data, and if that source system offer you that data, go ahead and use it. That's just my recommendation. There's definitely sometimes possibilities of that access control being handled by the backend, not stored in databases, stored in some other way in your systems. It could be a software as a service being online, where they rarely tend to include access rights in their REST APIs. So in those cases, it's also very hard to get the access design, the access logic directly from your source. And that's the cases where you're in some way forced to create your new security tables where you can add some access logic to your that data model. Okay, that was a bit of a mouthful. I think we'll just quickly brush up on what kind of sources we can use as security tables. And basically any source where you can get data to come into your Power BI as a table. So do you have flat files? Do you have Parquet in your data lake? Do you have a SQL database? Can you get it from a REST API or something? Or you can, all of these things that can end up as a table in Power BI, so it can be used. That also means if you have to create artificial security tables, you can follow the same logic. We can create them anywhere where we just know that we are able to import them into Power BI. So suggestions could be here, putting them in your SQL database, maybe using MDS to allow some governance people to easily manage them and not having to code SQL to add new people to the rows. Easier setups could be using SharePoint lists. And probably the easiest and probably also the most risky could be, I mean, you could use Excel. I don't think I would recommend it, but I mean, you could. And especially if you just want to test it out, you could. There's actually also a fourth. You could also use the create raw data in Power BI to create just raw binary tables with the data. That's definitely something I'm going to do now here in a second where I'm demoing this, because I don't want to sit here and have to add SQL rows to make a point here. But I mean, just know anywhere you can create a table where you can add these emails and add what they should get access to, it can be a security table. So it depends very much on your IT setup, and it depends very much on the other architecture. Is it a company that uses SharePoint lists a lot? That can be a very great place to put it. Is it a company that's very tight on security and it needs to be managed very, very hard by IT? Maybe you want it in a proper database. Yeah. So the options are manifold. Okay, let me give you a demo of a quick, simple security table, just so everybody know how one like that could look. So you look at the same data. For now, we want to ignore the data that's already there. So we're ignoring the key account and the key account manager. And we probably want to create something for the sales territory instead. So we want to make a setup where people can get access to specific countries. We go and we create a table in our preferred systems. Again, I would never recommend that you do it this way in a production setting. This is for demo purposes. So we can have the most simple setup, employee, the person who gets access, and the value. Good. So we can say this guy gets access to Germany. This guy, it's the only two I remember, so let's stick with those. This guy gets access to Germany too, but this guy also gets access to something I can spell, Canada. So we call it security table. And we load it. Very simple example. Of course, in your organization, that's going to be a lot of more rows because each row controls some sort of access setup. So you have your security table with employees and values. You could, if you only have one value, you could add this security table to your data model. So you could go something like wrong table. Oh, it's regions. Let me just quickly remember this data here. Country, Canada. Oh, it's many to one. Yeah, let's just ignore this example for now. So if you had a proper country list table, you could have added the security table to your country value, and then you could have put the RLS on security table. This would be a very simple setup. It would look something like this. So we call it dynamic security table. Security table. Something like this. And just go employee equals user principal name. Principal name. Good. Doing this, user principal name. I don't see the error. Doesn't matter. Anyway, so now whenever I log in, it will filter on employee in my security table, and it will filter down on the relation value towards country and cross-filter country and continue cross-filtering the whole data model that way. But it could also be that we wanted to make it a bit more dynamic. So let's say in the security table, we don't want it to be only a security table for one piece of dimension, but for multiple. So we can also add a value called type. So country, and something here where we go, in lack of a better example, the value would be 2021 and the type would be year. So we also want to limit who can access what years of data. So this account can access Germany and Canada, but you can only see data from 2001. Suddenly we have two pieces of dimensions handled by the same security table. And if you have it this way, it's not possible to continue with actually adding it to your data model. But lucky for us, we don't have to. Security table can just put aside the line here at the top as its own little thing. We can go and we can make a more advanced security table setup here, clear the table, and say what is it we actually want to filter. So we want to filter sales territory, and we want to filter country, and we want to filter that country should be in I just forgot the code. Anyway, so let's go through the logic, but I'm not sure I can show you this example. But anyway, you will say country should be in, and then you should get the list of employees list of employees in your security table that has I think it's something like this. Please, anyone, if they want to jump in on correcting this text. No, actually, I think
values would be the right way to do it, because then you're just going to get a unique list of those.
Yeah, but I actually realized that we can take a step back, because we're getting to a point where I actually want to show something else, and we are big low on time. So I can try to combine how I would validate the RLS with trying to actually make this work. So let's just quickly go through the slide, and we'll see if we can fix this together then. So how do I propose we validate security setups? I always follow a very structured approach where I want to pick the easiest option first, the one where I can continue myself. I don't need to wait for people. I don't need to log in and out of systems. So what I do is, if I want to validate an RLS script, the first thing I do is to create a calculated column. It allows me to use IntelliSense. It allows me to check on the data what returns as true or what returns as false. And from those true and false values, I can deduct how it behaves. It doesn't work for dynamic rollover security, because your calculated columns will be updated at refresh time. So you could try to create an iterative measure instead. It is probably not suggested, but then, I mean, the second option is to use the view as from Power BI. I used it before when I showed you one of the setups. It's a very powerful feature for testing out your role level security, and you can test it with any given role. You can also test it with a combination of roles, and you can also test it from a specific user's point of view. So whenever I've done that, because that's what I did when I first started, created a role level security setup, tested it with view as, everything worked fine, published it to the workspace, and then people started complaining, we see more data than people see more data than they should. So view as is not the complete truth, because it doesn't consider things like, well, what workspace roles do we have, or other ways RLS can be circumvented. So my next step is always create a test account, if that is possible in the organization, create a test account within that organization, start giving its role access to some data, log into that test account on Power BI service, or connecting to the dataset in Power BI desktop from that user, and see if it's actually limiting the data. Once that is done, because honestly with test accounts, you sometimes end up giving them admin access or something and forget to remove it again. So that also has some potential for error. So I always tend to, after checking that, I go to my stakeholders. I go to the department, for example, the sales department. I say to the guys, please check out the report. please report back immediately if you see data that is out of your scopes. And I will usually work with the super user in that department and say, please check this out and please be careful of if you see too much data. So that's my way of checking it. So following this logic, I actually think I'm gonna try go to sales order territory, create a new column. Assume that we're looking for a specific user. So here we want to check validate RLS. And we go like where we did before, country, values, and there we take the values in security table, value, and we add a filter. No, I'm out of my depths here. The demo guides are against me. Anyway, so let's just wrap it up, and probably I can send out a slide to all of you with how this was supposed to look when I have the headspace to think this through. Basically, you want this function to give you back the values of all the countries that are filtered to. So if we put it as a filter, and I don't think I can actually do this, but basically we want to do something like the values from the table security table with the filters employee equals, because we're testing the employees equals a.com and type type equals. So basically, I want to filter, return a list, and hopefully return. So if someone is quick in their mind and can come up with how I return the values of a specific column with this filter, please do go ahead and share, because that's basically what I want to. I want to return the values of value from this filter table. I know this is not correct, Dax, but let's just assume that I got this right. What you would see is that it would have returned true for all the sales territory lines where this filter was indeed returning true. And this is also how you could have used it in your role security code.
Yeah, I mean, Brian kind of suggested you could use calculate table potentially.
Why?
Use values security table. So in calculate table and then values. Sorry, calculate table first. It would be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then values, and then you're picking out then. Because you can't see the chat, can you, Matthias? Otherwise,
no, I can't. I can't. So thanks for all the help, you guys. But yeah, I don't know if there's a way to enable the chat. Anyway, I don't think we need to finish this to make the point. Basically, what you want to do is you want to make a DAX that goes to your dimension table, like sales territory. Oh, wow, it's returning something. Let's pretend that it's returning what we want. And then you have a calculated column. I checked it with a special case because, again, we cannot use dynamic values in calculated columns. So I need to check for specific uses here. And you can see it actually gives access to Canada and Germany. So thank you. Was it Brian that suggested this?
Yep.
definitely helped. It definitely works. So you can see here it's returning true, true. This also means that you should be able to copy the same script, plunge it directly into your row level security filter. Here in security table, remove this one. Add one to sales territory here. And this one should not be static. It should be user principal name. So instead of checking for a single user, I now make it dynamic by replacing this static user with the user principal name.
It's principal with PAL.
Ah, wait, what? What's the mistake?
It's correct there.
Oh, great. Well, we'll just do that. Ah, yes, it's not principal, it's principal. Yeah, of course. Thank you. So we now have the dynamic setup. The row level security now looks at this table. It's following the same logic as this. If I use this user, it will follow the same logic like this calculated column. It should return only Canada. And so we're using the security table filter, and we use this person, and it should return Canada and Germany. So suddenly we have a row level security filter that is not just basing itself on what we wrote in the script itself. It's also basing itself of who is actually viewing the data, but it's combining that with looking into the data. And you can actually see here how I'm limited. I don't even see the other values in the table. I only see those that I have access to. And that's controlled by the table itself. It's controlled by the security table, because here we define that my name gets access to Germany and Canada. So very powerful, very flexible, very hard to give you a lot of examples that you can just take and implement, because these are all five very powerful building blocks, as I call them, your own personal Lego. You can stack them together and you can make just exactly what's right for your company or your clients or your organization. So I think that was it for now. I think that rounds it up pretty well. So yeah, I'm Matthias Helkær, and I was very happy to present to you today, and hope that all of you will reach out. I really enjoy having discussions on LinkedIn as well, so feel free to do that. And I think we can move on to some questions.
Yeah, I think that and great session, Matthias. Thank you very much. There was some definitely food for thought in there using that kind of disconnected security table. Really,
yep.
And a lot of people mentioning in the chat that it's a really good idea, and something definitely they're going to investigate. So I think there was a couple of questions. So someone asked it, would you be able to share your presentation? And I think you might be on corporate PowerPoint, so that might not be possible, but let us know if that is possible, and we can find a way of doing it if it is.
It is. I mean, it's actually a mistake that I didn't remove this logo. I did for all the other slides, so sorry about that. But yeah, I can definitely share the slides.
Okay.
No problem. I will brush up on them, remove some of those that are kind of copied to each other,
yes.
just to have and send it as a PDF so it makes sense and it's clear. No problem.
No, that's fine. And maybe obviously people really want the slide deck, they can connect with you on LinkedIn and kind of just ask you directly.
That's also a great option. I like that.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And then there was a question from Bertalan about inviting users to your Active Directory. I assume using something like Azure B2B. Right. So, and then how do you find out their UPN without involving them? I think that's probably pretty difficult. Mm-hmm. But their UPN would normally be their email address.
Yep.
I think if you were inviting them, you would send the invite to their own email address with their own domain, right? Not your domain.
Oh, we're talking about external users here.
Yeah, external users. So kind of inviting somebody using Azure business to business or something similar.
Yeah,
How do you get their UPN?
So I am, don't hold me up on this. I haven't implemented this before, but I've played around with it. I think that when you invite them on their Microsoft account from somewhere else, and it creates kind of a copy account in your Active Directory. But I do think that they keep their original UPN. So if you invited Casper at Microsoft.com, I think his UPN would still be Casper at Microsoft.com in your ILS setup.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. And it's an area that I'm not that familiar with, so I didn't. I mean, I shared a link for, that was a Microsoft Docs about sharing content externally. Maybe that'll help. And then another question then kind of from Brian was from the reliable testing point of view, and it is a pain, right? And even when you get to, and that's just testing it in desktop, right? How do you test it in the service, which is also painful.
Yeah.
And kind of, is there possible kind of from in code or something similar, or switching some things around?
So what's the question? How to?
So the question was, are there any thoughts or any way to test using code directly?
Using what directly?
Using, could you actually code just to iterate through all the users and just see what results you got back?
It's not something I've done. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So you want to turn it around and see for a given data who has access to that data, or?
No, just kind of iterate through all of the users, right? Oh. So if you had a list of users, just actually and test it for every individual user.
I mean, I don't know if you're aware, but there's a similar functionality on the service that allows you to do the view as we did in desktop. That's a possibility. But I don't think you'll get around the pain of having to shuffle through each and every one of them. I am out of my depths regarding if it's even possible. I think perhaps they were made some addition to the REST API where you could check if a given user had access to a given data. But I mean, it's worth exploring. Don't hold me up on it. But I have this feeling that it was added recently, something along those lines.
Yeah, I think it's one of the scanning APIs?
I think so. So. I mean, if you're working in a very big setup with very many users, that could be a way to go, if that is possible. So check up for yourself.
Yeah, and Matthias, a different Matthias, obviously, also mentioned that you can specify a user or role in the connection string if you're using XML endpoints. So that's potentially a way to actually test as well.
Nice, good tip.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I think that there's no other questions. Thanks very much again, Matthias. That was a really good session. Definitely some advanced RLS techniques there and different ways of thinking about solving a challenging problem, because it always is. RLS is always interesting and can be painful, but there's some really good ideas there. Yeah. Yes, brilliant. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll stop the recording. And just in case anybody